The Parley is a debate event that champions open-mindedness, kindness and respectful dialogue when exploring contradictory ideas. Museum of Sticks and Stones would like to acknowledge and extend our deep respect to the traditional custodians of the land on which we work and live. This episode is recorded in Meanjin, the land of the Turrbal and Yagara people. We acknowledge their connection to land, sea and community and pay respects to elders past, present and emerging.
Pri, can you tell us about some of the tools that you've created for use in the Museum of Sticks and Stones?
Sure. So we have a number of resources on our website, and one of them is the field guide. So we've added a lot of reflection exercises on there to really understand what kind of person, are you online. We've got a number of archetypes that we've derived sort of from research as well. And it's also all about reflecting, but also, looking at how we can navigate complex conversations online and what happens when we experience stress online, when we sort of have that urge to fight or avoid these conversations, what's actually happening in our mind, in our body, and how to navigate that.
Okay, so we'll come back to the biology of what happens when you're stressed. Let's go back to these tools for a moment. Archetypes. What are some online archetypes people have?
Sure. So there's the bystander. So there's, seeing all these comments online and how that actually impacts you as a bystander. There's also, the stirrer. So, you think about trolls, they just want to stir the pot. They're not actually there to have these meaningful conversations, they just want to get a rise out of people. So these are kind of these archetypes, and the idea is that we actually can inhabit all of these archetypes. Then the research shows that all of us create harm online. It might not be just the comment sections on Facebook, but it might be on, family chats on Facebook or, other group chats that we're creating harm online. So I guess breaking that stereotype of what someone that creates harm looks like. We might have these stereotypes, but it's actually all of us.
Yeah, what's the typical stereotype of a harmer?
Exactly, yeah. So I think that would be, for all of us, it might be a certain kind of person, but it's all of us, and having that conversation is important.
It's interesting talking about these different archetypes that people have and the fact that we can be different in different situations, especially if something annoys us. Maybe we can be a troll or a stirrer, whereas if we don't care about a topic, we can be a bystander. Can you just talk about the fact that we play different roles online? Because that would be interesting to hear more about the fact that there's no villains and good people. We're all a bit of everything.
Yeah, definitely. I think so. I actually have a background in social psychology, which is all about how our social environment, the presence of other people, can actually impact our attitudes and impact our behaviour. So our personality is sort of only one part of the puzzle. So, we might see someone that's really kind, really polite, but then in a different situation, maybe it's something that they care deeply about. It's threatened a important value or worldview, and they can react very, very differently. And so there's this idea that, what forms our identity is our values, is our worldviews. They make up who we are. And as soon as someone attacks our values, attacks our worldview, an important part of ourselves, we're sort of programmed to defend ourselves. We're programmed to attack.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so know what your hot buttons are, because that's when you become particularly hostile.
Exactly.
Okay, and before we go any further, can you just tell us a little bit more about your role within the Museum of Sticks and Stones and what you do and where you came from? What's your academic background?
Yeah, so my role is a wellbeing designer. So that is supporting or designing tools to support mental wellbeing. So that's my role with MOS, the Museum of Sticks and Stones. And my background's in psychology. So I did my PhD a couple of years ago. I tutor in university and also have a research background. So I'm sort of more in the wellness or wellbeing space at the moment, but have a background in social psychology and kind of really interested in understanding, I guess, why people, believe in what they do and why do they, believe so strongly with, even by providing, evidence for the contrary. Okay,
so we've talked about one thing so far is know where you're hostile, because that's where you might... So know what you care about, because you might feel personally attacked when that comes up and behave in quite a hostile way. Is there anything else you can tell us about from a behavioural point of view that we should know about when it comes to being hateful, being hostile online?
Yeah, I think understanding, I guess, why we're experiencing these kind of overwhelming emotions sometimes and why we're reacting in this way, which is the activation of our stress response. It goes back to that. It's, it was designed to help us survive, to help our ancestors, our caveman ancestors, survive these life-threatening, dangers, essentially. So we're programmed to fight, to flee, to freeze as well. So there's two stress responses that people don't usually or might not have usually heard about, which is freeze. And essentially that was designed to help us in a situation where we feel like we're not strong enough to fight, or we might be too slow to outrun a threat. And then there's fawn as well, which is when we try to appease the threat. So you might see that in an online environment, like people trying to moderate, group chats and and that's all because we're experiencing sort of these signals that we're in danger, and that's what activates the stress response. So you can see all of these, activations of stress in an online environment. So fight, we see people arguing online, maybe creating hate. We see fleeing, so that looks like avoidance, freezing, maybe not knowing how to sort of respond to people. So we're seeing these kinds of reactions in the online space as well.
Was our nervous system, our stress response system, designed to be activated as frequently as it is today because of the internet?
No. Yeah, definitely not. And I think that's why it's really important to understand how we can, I guess, go back to a state of rest and digest, because, stress is normal. We are built to experience stress, but like you said, not at such a frequent rate that we are.
I hadn't heard of that one you talked about where you fawn, I think was the one word I've heard used before, where you just act nice and try to keep the peace. Can you tell us more about that response that people have?
Yeah, so that's really about, it's kind of like people pleasing. You're essentially experiencing, you feel like you're in danger. So what you're trying to do is make nice on both ends. So that might look like, if you've got two people having an argument, maybe, it's your parents having an argument and you're trying to just calm down your mum and dad and see from both sides. And that's actually, a response to you feeling like you're in danger.
Okay, so what are the most common responses people have on the internet? Are we more a fight? Are we becoming more argumentative and fight rather than flight? Or what's happening to us online?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think it might even depend on what it is about. I'm not actually quite sure about that, but I think we do see a lot of the fight. And I mean, that's what comes up in the comment sections, really. So I guess even if those four responses to stress are, let's say, equal, we're seeing more of the fight. And I think that is also something that's more positively reinforced, with you can like a comment, you can love a comment that's arguing, but we're not seeing that positive reinforcement for people who don't want to engage, who might, turn their social media off. And
right, so the algorithm likes a fight.
It definitely does.
Okay, that's dangerous to know about, but it's good to become more aware of it. So what are some tips that you can offer people to have potentially difficult conversations which inspire these responses? What's a good way to have a difficult conversation?
Yeah, I think first of all, identifying when you're experiencing, these overwhelming emotions, identifying that in yourself, how are you feeling? But also, if I think back to when I've had a successful outcome, when I've had a difficult conversation, it's when my goal going into it is one where I want to learn the other person's point of view. There's this goal of, let's resolve this together. I think we can all think about situations where we may have gone into a conversation where we want to be right and we want them to know that we are right. And I think when that happens, we miss that opportunity for learning, for noticing maybe when we might have made assumptions, or noticing when, there are opportunities to sort of validate their point of view as well.
Is there anything that puts us into that mindset of wanting to be right, like stress or anything? Can you tell us so that we can more easily come out of that attitude?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's hard in the moment, right? Because that switch can go off so quickly where we want to react. You know, that kind of feeling part of our brain is activated and that thinking part of our brain is switched off. So it's really hard. I would say returning to the conversation when you feel a little bit more, a little bit calmer about it, which I know is hard to do. There are things that we can do like deep breathing, taking a walk, coming back to the conversation. But there is a powerful strategy that you can do quite quickly, which is just naming how you're feeling. And I've talked about this, I guess, before with some of my other projects, but simply putting into words how you're feeling at the time actually helps you sort of separate yourself from what you're experiencing. So it's a really powerful emotion regulation tool that can take, 2 seconds to do.
That's interesting, because if it's not named, it's mystical and it's all over you. But once it's named, it's an object that you can look at and keep at a distance.
Exactly. And there's, research that looked at, and brain scans and looked at how that actually activates more of that thinking part of our brain, which is deprioritized when we're experiencing stress. So we want to kind of shift that and I guess activate that thinking part of our brain so we can move towards a more calmer approach.
What happens if we don't? What's the effect of all this stress and fight and flight and fawn and freeze on our bodies and minds?
Yeah, so over time, that can really impact our mental health as well, our physical health. And so, we have these stress containers that kind of keep building up during the day. Day-to-day stress management is really important. Finding ways that you can regulate your nervous system, going out for those walks, doing those deep breathing. And we talked a bit about how the stress response is activated when we feel like we're in danger. So actually sending your mind and body signals that you're safe is going to help you with, the words that you use, and also practicing sort of relaxation strategies too, deep breathing and things like that.
Okay, what about this concept that you've mentioned before of conversational inoculation? What is that?
Yeah, okay. So it's this idea that, so it's basically about, there's so much misinformation that's going around. And what can we do about it? Like, misinformation's really, really dangerous. It can impact, for example, vaccine uptake, But so what can we do then to I guess, mitigate that? And this idea of conversation inoculation or attitudinal inoculation is that we can expose people to a myth, and we can show them how to argue against that myth to help them, to basically inoculate them. So it's kind of like, if you've got a vaccine and we're giving you sort of that virus. We're giving you a virus so you can learn how to fight against that virus. So it's a similar way of, here is an argument from a false sort of belief or false claim. Here is how we can fight against that. So one of the early research studies that were done on this area was looking at peer pressure for teenagers who, where peers might want them to smoke, for example. So it's, this is what your peers might say, and this is how you can fight against that. And that idea is used a lot in public health. It's used in environmental science, climate change. There's so much misinformation there. So this is what people say, but actually this is the evidence that it's not. So it's, how can we find ways to, inoculate them, essentially?
Yeah, that's a good concept, because people who often believe in misinformation might have a certain aggression to them, a certain passion in their beliefs. They might use ridicule to mock the other side as sheep. So people don't want to be a sheep, and so it can be hard to fight back. Can you just tell us about the psychology around the misinformation that people should be aware of?
So one thing as well about inoculation is that it's almost the way that the argument is formulated or the information is presented isn't in a way that's going to threaten your worldview belief as much as it would have previously. So instead of saying, no, you're wrong, this is what the evidence says, it's almost taking a bit of that myth and going, yeah, that's an interesting idea, but here is, this is the evidence. And I saw a podcast the other day. I think it's an ABC podcast called Science Versus. Do you know Science Versus?
I haven't heard that, no.
No, and they actually presented this idea really, really well without saying that this is what they were doing.
Yeah.
So they were talking about one of these claims. Can't remember exactly the health claim, but it was something related to, saturated fats are really, really bad. It's going to, cause cancer and this and this and this. And so that was the claim. And slowly, every single sort of claim that this person made, they showed the evidence. And it wasn't done in a way that was, it was just done in a way that was very respectful, I think.
Right, okay.
And it didn't get your guard up because you didn't know exactly where the conversation was going to go. You were sort of just seeing where it was going to lead you.
It's like conversational Aikido or something.
Yeah.
Use your opponent's weight against, I don't know, because remember when, were you there when Socrates used to walk around the markets in Greece and just ask why? Why do you think that? Why? Why?
That's awesome.
And people would just trip themselves up by not being able to
Yeah.
answer why eventually. So it feels like it's that, just
Yeah.
trying to get to the bottom of someone's beliefs rather than attacking their person.
Exactly, because I don't think we think so deeply about a lot of things,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. We've talked about difficult conversations in this before. Do you have some practical tips for maybe not dealing with difficult conversations, but just to help people online? They're getting into an online argument. It can turn hostile. Do you have some practical tips that you can offer people to keep the peace?
Yeah. I think it's, if you want to offer your opinion, it's doing so, in a way that's respectful. It's, not doing those things like name calling. We know that can then activate that other person's stress response. And as soon as that happens, they're not able to think through sort of what's happening and engage in a rational way. So it's how can you get your point across in a way that's very respectful, but also knowing when it's time to just, disengage, and that, nothing you say is going to be helpful. And maybe if it's someone returning to the conversation later, but just knowing when that boundary is, it's not working.
Yeah, sometimes you have to pull yourself out of the conversation. Yeah. And knowing what might be a hostile space. If you go into certain message boards, it's expected that the conversation is going to be quite hostile.
Yeah. I think just identifying, how you're feeling. Like, there's that, there's a term called digital mindfulness, which I really like because, I don't think it's very practical to say, don't go on social media at all or, so how can we practice digital mindfulness, which is just the intentional use of social media. It's, not just going on social media to scroll and waste time, but, what are certain forums that I want to go on to, or what are certain times and things like that. And just sort of, I guess, checking in with yourself. Is this benefiting you? Is this, we don't need to teach everyone out there, about, our worldviews or what we think. So
it's almost curating your online experience for a good reason, because if you just go there for the dopamine hit, you'll just go where the algorithm takes you, and it could take you to some pretty poisonous places.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Are there any pitfalls? This is a similar question. Any pitfalls that we should avoid when being online?
Yeah, I think, again, it's that sort of name calling, and it's really sticking to what you want to say. And the reason why name calling isn't effective as well is because, we're programmed to defend ourselves from attack, whether that's a physical attack or a psychological attack. And as soon as we do that, it's because our stress response is activated. And again, that's sort of the part of our brain that's involved in complex thinking and problem solving basically shuts down. So if you want people to sort of understand your point of view, it's not great. It's not a great way to do that by name calling.
Yeah.
So avoid name calling, and use that mindset of what's the sort of common goal here? What am I trying to achieve? And also trying to learn as well. Why does that person have that particular opinion? It could be maybe their upbringing or personal experiences that they've had that led them here.
Yeah, okay. Better understanding. And I'll ask you about a cultural phenomenon I've noticed, maybe because a lot of my online friends are comedians, and they always, if they want to say something real, they'll say, wholesome post here, and then they'll say, almost like they're apologizing for being honest. They've got, I'm supposed to be funny and sarcastic and mean, so if I'm not going to be that way, I almost have to apologize to say, wholesome post here, and others will say, oh, look how earnest that comment was. It's almost like they're embarrassed to be open really open at this emotional level. Have you noticed that phenomenon? What can you say about it?
Yeah, I think it's because we don't want to seem attention seeking, or we don't want to seem like, hey, look how great our life is. But sometimes we want to post something because we want to share it with others. Like it might actually be very wholesome, like a wholesome intention that we felt really good in this moment and we want to share that with family and friends.
Right.
But I think there's that perception that when we're sharing, it's because we want attention, and adoration and things like that. So, but I think that's funny. Yeah, we do that.
Apologising for being wholesome.
Or humble brag, all those kinds of things.
That's right. Okay. Have you got any personal stories in this area of people that you've seen encountering hate or anything personal that inspired you to do the work that you do?
Yeah. I think what really inspires me to do the work I do is just my experiences with anxiety, really. And, I think we all care to some extent what people think of us, some more than others. And so, learning how to manage stress and learning how to manage those kind of unhelpful thoughts, those cognitive distortions that happen, those unhelpful thinking styles is very important to me.
Give us some of those unhelpful thinking styles. One I can think of is catastrophizing, which we're all capable of. Can you give us the landscape of anxiety-inducing thinking? Yeah,
so mind reading. We assume that we know what people are thinking of us all the time. All or nothing thinking. So I actually used this example the other day where it's sort of that perfectionist, like, if I'm cooking for people and I don't have 2 ingredients, then it's all a failure.
Right.
When in actual fact, it's delicious. No one's even going to notice that you didn't have that garnish or that, whatever it is. Yeah.
Okay, so mind reading and perfectionism.
Yeah, all or nothing thinking.
All or nothing thinking, okay.
Yeah, and also personalisation. So we can experience this when, let's say, someone in the office looks like they're really grumpy.
Right.
And we think automatically, oh my gosh, it's something that we've done.
Yes.
And we might even kind of understand that, no, they're probably going through something, or I know that they're going through something, but we still feel that, oh my gosh, what did I say?
Yeah, I did that the other day. I walked into a petrol station and the station attendant was walking past and I smiled and he scowled at me or he didn't say hello. So I walked out of that petrol station. I was like, I'm not buying a chocolate Freddo from you. I'll just order an Uber. So I was being so petty. But he probably was just in his own world thinking about what am I going to do next. And so, we can attribute things that aren't there.
Funny. Yeah, maybe he got a text from someone, just before that made him really angry.
Yes. Well, it's good to know that these are things that are going on. Are there any stats around this topic that you can share with us about what's happening in Australia or internationally?
Sure. So in Australia, I think I read a few stats from eSafety where 75% of Australians, adults, reported experiencing a negative experience online, which was about 20% more than 2019. So that's quite a big increase, which isn't super surprising, I guess, because we are relying on technology for a lot more things, but also we're using it to distract ourselves, so all those things. So it is rising.
Are your tools evolving as the internet changes and AI turns up and the internet changes? Are you planning to evolve some of these tools?
Yes, definitely. So we've done a bit of research. We're looking at how can we share all of these, our research findings and stories of people, but also, what are some practical ways that we can support people in this space? So we know that self-reflection is really important, that, we talked a bit about the stress response and how that's triggered, but how can we sort of stop and get people to think? So is there a way with technology that like a plug-in or something like that where we can help people to do that? So we're using our research to inform, I guess, the practical applications of these things.
One of the tools you mentioned right at the start is getting people to self-reflect so they can see who they are online. Are people surprised at who they are online after they've finished your questions?
Yeah, I think they definitely are, because I think, there's this, heuristic, this cognitive shortcut that we all have called the fundamental attribution error, which basically shows us how we can explain away things. So, for example, if I cause harm online, I might be able to explain that away as, oh, but it was a really bad day. It was all of these different things. And we might not remember that situation. Whereas we attribute other people's actions as, it's part of their personality. That's who they are. And so I think, we are very surprised at knowing that, hey, we all create harm online. We don't like to think about ourselves in that way.
It's interesting. You're almost like we're the hero, the other guy's the villain.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay. There's all this psychology behind this, which is good to know. And some of this might be quite hard to tackle. It's almost like it's an inbuilt instinct, like in-group and out-group thinking. How much can we change and improve through self-awareness?
Yeah. I think, self-awareness, self-reflection, all of that is really key. Another aspect, I think, is having more examples of how we can respond is also important. So sometimes, maybe all we've ever known is engaging in this way, in a harmful way, whereas maybe we can experience or have people around us that are choosing to take on a different sort of direction. And that's one of the things that we're doing with Moss is that storytelling, hear people's experience of not just being harmed, but creating harm themselves, which I think is really powerful because we remember stories.
On that, though, it sounds like you would like to get more people involved in storytelling and research projects. Can you just tell us about that?
Yes. So, like I said, I think storytelling is really, really powerful. When we hear people's stories online, we can empathise with them. We often project ourselves into these stories or project someone else we know. And so we want to hear from everyone. What were your experiences if you were harmed online or if you were the person doing the harming? And again, breaking down those stereotypes of what that looks like, because it's all of us. Before
I came to do this, someone was saying, I can't make any money in the arts. And she was just talking about how difficult it is to make money. Her theatre company's lost money. She's had to fire staff or she just can't. And someone posted on her wall, have you thought about being a YouTuber? And she just found that really unhelpful. She's like, that's not the answer. I don't have those skills. And so maybe that person thought they were helping, but that's not what she needed in that moment, which is probably applicable to all sorts of therapy situations. People don't just want solutions all the time.
Yeah. I think it's really hard because it's like in that situation, your instinct is to engage and say, this is why it wasn't helpful. And I think learning to just disengage and acknowledging that, the comment section in on Facebook, whatever it is, isn't representative of everyone.
Okay. All right. And is there anything we haven't covered today that you wanted to get across when it comes to the tools that Moss is using or anything else?
Yeah, I think, just share your stories with us. We'd love to hear from you. I think it can be really helpful for other people to connect with your story and, and relate to it. So, that's really it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us, Pri.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for listening to the Parley podcast. To register for future events, you can find the link in our show notes. You'll also be able to explore our research and hear people's stories about experiencing harm online. You can find us across all socials at sticksstones.org. The Parley Unplugged is proudly brought to you by Darla Health, your personal wellbeing partner. Darla is an Australian-born AI-powered wellbeing app designed to help you understand yourself, your emotions, and provide personalised feedback and tools to improve individual mental wellbeing. Head to hellodarla.com to learn more.